Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. And before we start, I'd like to once again thank all of you that have tried out and reviewed Smiley Face Coffee. Thank you for the trust. And for those of you who haven't tried it yet, go ahead and give it a shot. The link is in the description. Now, let's get started with today's main story. This post is from the subreddit Relationships and it's by user Cerise Biscuit. Is it wrong for me, female 20, to choose my friendship with my ex, male 22, over the guy I'm dating now, male 23? The title sounds bad, I know, but please bear with me. I'll try to give you as much context as possible. So, Ben and I've been friends for a bit over 5 years now. During this time, we dated twice, but never over 3 months. Both times, we split amicably and figured that we just work better as friends after all. We weren't romantically involved after that, but we did kiss in a game of truth and dare a little over 3 months ago. It basically confirmed to me that we're just friends because I felt nothing. Ben and I have so much in common and we know each other so well that it's a running joke in our friend group that I'd be able to read his mind. Of course, this is not true, but we can talk to each other openly and are just really comfortable around one another. We helped each other through dark times and I can always count on him. Ben is one of my closest friends and he just happens to be my ex. We joke about our failed relationships like, what were we thinking, lol, and stuff like, been there, done that, fool me twice and so on. It's really just a joke to us by now, and we will never try having a relationship ever again. Now, in a month after the truth and dare kiss with Ben, I met this guy. Let's call him Chris. We met at a party and hit it off right away, and had a deep conversation and ended the night with a hookup. We didn't get in contact right away after that, but a month later, we started seeing each other. We haven't had the defining the relationship talk yet, but we agreed that we enjoyed getting to know each other and liked how things were for now. Fast forward a bit. My best friend and her boyfriend wanted to throw a party. They invited all our friends and allowed dates to come along too. I thought this would be a great opportunity for Chris to meet all my friends officially. I already knew that Ben would be there, so I mentioned it to Chris. I had already told him that I was still friends with the ex before. Chris told me that he wasn't bothered and that it shouldn't bother him anyway since we weren't even official yet. I was happy that he took it so well, but reassured him that he could always tell me if he ended up being bothered and he wouldn't have to play cool just because we weren't official yet. The night of the party comes, I introduce Chris as the guy I've been dating for a month now to my friends. We drink, we mingle, I catch up with them and Chris gets to know some of them and seems to enjoy it. Chris called the next day and told me he had a good time and I should thank my friend for the invitation on his behalf. I do exactly that, and my friend tells me how lovely Chris has been and jokes that I should better make it official soon or else someone else will see what a catch he is and snatch him from me. Typical girl talk, you know? So it seemed that both my friends and my potential boyfriend nailed their first impressions. All was well, until I met with Ben for coffee on Sunday. Naturally, the party came up and I asked him what he thought of Chris. Ben was hesitant at first, but then told me that Chris had been a little frosty towards him. I decided to give Chris the benefit of the doubt. There were nearly 30 people at the party and maybe he didn't get the chance to be in an in-depth conversation with Ben. So I didn't talk to Chris about this and told Ben that he must just be imagining things. Ben agrees and we don't mention Chris again for the rest of the afternoon. This brings us to yesterday evening. I was over at Chris's place and we just finished dinner and were thinking of watching a movie before hitting the sheets. The conversation drifted off and Chris asked me about my weekend plans. I told him that some friends and I would meet for drinks on Saturday to celebrate a birthday. Then he asked me if Ben would be there. Not really knowing where he was going with this, I answered that yes, he would also be there. And that's where crap hit the fan. In a passive-aggressive tone, he said how ridiculous it was how much time we spent together and that I should be with him if I loved him so much. I was dumbstruck. Days before, he told me he was cool with it. He even insisted that he was not at all bothered, and now this? I told him that I've hung out with Ben only 3 times since we started dating. I tried to tell him repeatedly that I had no feelings for Ben. I tried to reason with him, but he was really defensive all of a sudden and tried to argue that even if I didn't have feelings for Ben, he would most definitely still have the hots for me. That's when I got angry and told him that if he trusted me so little, we might as well end it then and there. He didn't want to end things, me either to be honest, and told me that he could really see a future with me if it wasn't for Ben. I explained that Ben was my friend, and I wouldn't ditch a friend for a guy who was this insecure only a month into dating. I didn't spend the night and went home instead. I still really like Chris, but leaving friends behind is a huge deal breaker for me. He texted me this morning and asked me if I wanted to talk things over. I haven't responded yet, and I honestly don't know what to do now. My head is a mess. I don't want things to end with Chris. It's been so good up until now, but I can't lose Ben either. Well, OP, I gotta say, I feel like there's a piece missing here. I mean, off the bat, just with the information you've presented, we could say, no, get away from Chris, he sounds incredibly controlling, that doesn't sound right, blah, 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 red flags all over the place. However, the three things that have my head itching, thinking that there's something missing here is 1. He was absolutely cool with you being friends with the ex, no problem, he was gonna go to the party with him, all good. But then all of a sudden, he gets really defensive after going to this party. And he says that he thinks that Ben still has the hots for you, even if you don't for him. On the flip side, when you asked Ben what he thought of Chris, he said he was a little bit frosty with him. Now, sure, you could say, well, Chris knew exactly who Ben was and he was just absolutely jealous and he just didn't want to strike a friendship with him. But apparently everybody else liked him. Now, this could mean two things. 1, something happened at that party between Ben and Chris that you're not aware of, or 2, Chris is just a master manipulator. Now, to solve it, of course, I think you'd need to sit down with Chris and hear what he has to say, just like, he wanted to talk. Just be weary about it and then go and ask Ben some questions and see what happens. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. And what do you guys think about this whole situation? How would you go about it? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Travelbug898 says, you don't have to date Chris, but understand that if you have an ex who you're so close to that all your friends say that you can read his mind, a lot of guys are going to have issues with that. Are you going to be able to prioritize a relationship with someone else over your friendship with Ben if a relationship does get serious? It's not cool for him to try and control who your friends are, but if this pattern repeats itself in future relationships, it may be beneficial to take a small step back from your friendship with Ben. But Chris's attempt to manipulate your friendship with Ben when you guys aren't even official makes him an ass. And OP responds, I'd absolutely prioritize my boyfriend. Like I said, I saw Ben 3 times and 2 of those were larger get-togethers. I was well aware that being friends with an ex is difficult to overcome. That's why I tried to reassure him to openly communicate with me if he was uncomfortable so I could act accordingly. But he just kept it until he exploded. He handled it badly, but I don't know if this was a one-time thing or if that's who he really is. I really like the guy and wanted to be with him. This is all such a mess. Deleted says, this is why I don't date people who are close with their ex. Just too much potential for drama. I hope you guys can talk it out, but it looks like a mismatch in boundaries to me. Maps 2001 says, if you hadn't been Ben's ex, then I would say that Chris was being insecure. But the fact remains that a former lover of yours is still playing an important part in your life. You can break up with Chris. In fact, he will probably do it first. But please remember, no man will put up with an ex on the scene for long, especially an ex that you have no problem hugging or kissing. And OP responds, I was very open with my history with Ben to Chris and he seemed fine. I even asked if he had a problem with it and he again denied it. Going in, I knew that not everyone is cool with being friends with ex-partners, but I wanted Chris to be honest with me if things made him uncomfortable. I think that's what hurts me the most. Additional information from OP's comments. I'm just sad that he wasn't honest about his feelings with me. I understand that being close to an ex is a stress factor in a relationship, and that's why I wanted him to talk to me if something bothered him. I just don't want to choose. Chris and I had an amazing connection, and it feels so wrong to leave it behind. I really thought we were compatible. But Ben has been my friend for so long, and I cannot lose him over something like this. My interactions with Ben feel natural to me, but I've never taken an outside perspective into account. I only briefly talked to Ben at the party as Chris was my priority and I wanted to make sure he felt welcome. I talked more with my girlfriends that night. I'd hope that my friends won't joke about my ex being my soulmate in front of Chris, but I probably should have had a word with them before the party, just to be safe. Apart from an occasional hug, Ben and I rarely have physical contact. I also wouldn't describe 4 months total as an extensive romantic history. Overall, we are a pretty open and close-knit group, and I don't think I treat Ben differently from the others. OP's edit. Wow, this got way more attention than I anticipated. Thank you all for your advice. I can't answer all the comments, but I read all of them. I agreed to talk to Chris and we had a calm discussion. He apologized for how he lashed out, and I said that I should have been more considerate of how this situation affected him. Some stuff came up in our talk that put some things in perspective, and I'll have to deal with them in the next few days. Again, thanks to everyone who took the time to give me advice, and I'll keep you updated. Alright, well, the community had different angles for OP to consider and apparently they helped. And also, she had that conversation with Chris and some stuff came up and we're gonna find out now in the update. So let's move on with that. But before, if you are enjoying this story so far, go ahead and click that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, come join us. This community is awesome. And now we move on to the update. Thanks to all the people who gave me their advice and perspective on the matter. It was greatly appreciated and helped me sort my priorities out. First, let me clear up some things. The thing with the mind reading is that it is not really meant to be taken as a soulmate situation. Ben sometimes struggles to get the point across, but I seem to get it most of the time and can tell people what he meant to say. So I think this got blown out of proportion a bit. Sorry, I should have phrased this differently. Also, many people referred to Chris as my boyfriend in their comments, which he was not. We were dating for a month and we weren't an official couple. Another thing I should have talked about is how Ben and I ended up dating for a second time. An acquaintance told us that it was a shame that our dating never worked out and we decided to test the waters again. Not even a month in, I said that it did not feel right. He agreed and said how relieved he was that I felt it too, and we went back to being friends. That was considerably easy since we hadn't even had sex in that month. Chris knew that the second time wasn't all that serious. One comment was suspicious of why Ben hadn't moved on, so I probably should have mentioned that Ben had a girlfriend for about 4 months. I liked her and she was always lovely to me. She left him because, ironically, she still had feelings for her ex. So I thought it'd be safe to assume that he'd be over me as well. None of my close friends talked about my history with Ben and they didn't joke about us at the party. They genuinely wanted me to be happy and most of them instantly liked Chris. However, something did happen at the party that ended up causing all this mess. So buckle up, folks. After reading some of your comments, I texted Chris back and agreed to talk about things that night under the condition that we both would be civil and adult about it. He was fine with that and I came over to his place. Chris started the conversation by immediately apologizing for how aggressive he had reacted and how stupid he had felt for not being able to keep it together. He said it wasn't fair of him to mistrust me and that his jealousy was ridiculously overblown, considering we weren't even official. I told him that it's okay if he gets jealous or uncomfortable, but I just wished we could have talked about it before things escalated. I apologized for not being sensitive enough to realize that no matter what he said to me, he wouldn't exactly be thrilled with the situation. I could have made more of an effort to reassure him and adapt to situations so that we could both be happy. We both made it clear that it would make us sad if things ended before they had even begun, and we'd probably end up regretting not giving this another shot. After all, we had this crazy chemistry and got along so well. Now, all that seemed to stand in the way of a happy ending was an awkward conversation about my friendship with Ben. But before I could even get into it, Chris dropped a bomb. So, at the party, he overheard Ben and his best friend talking. Ben said how awful it was to see me with another guy and how unfair it was that we weren't an item. Chris did not know what to do with that. He said that that's where the little jealousy and insecurity he had went from 0 to 100 and he couldn't help seeing red. He weighed his options and thought that if he told me, it'd end in a situation where it was his word against Ben's, and I'd believe Ben more. He also didn't want to be that guy that ruined a friendship, so he swallowed his feelings until they burst out when I casually mentioned hanging out with Ben. As he told me that, I put my guard up and took it with more than just a grain of salt. That story sounded almost cartoonishly convenient. Some people in the comments warned me that he would try to manipulate me and that I had to look out for myself. I told them, in all honesty, that I'd have to talk to some other people as it was hard to take his word for it, given the current situation. Chris was very understanding and told me that whatever solution I'd come to, he'd have to accept it because, as he put it, he lost the right to be involved in this by throwing a jealous fit. I disagreed, but he was adamant about me having to find out the truth. We ended the night with me telling him that I really wanted to trust in what he said to me for the sake of salvaging our relationship, but it was just so hard and I was so confused. He again said that he understood and that I should take my time to sort things out. Then he gave me a long hug and I left to figure things out. And oh boy, did I figure things out. The first thing that came into my head was that at the party where I was dared to kiss Ben, guess who thought of the dare? It was Ben's best friend, who, if I'd take Chris's word, would know if Ben still had feelings for me. Ben's friend was also the person who suggested playing Truth or Dare in the first place, even though he usually doesn't like that many drinking or party games. Then I thought about how weird Ben acted when I asked him about Chris. At the time, I was convinced that he just didn't want to hurt my feelings, but what if he just saw his chance of getting Chris out of the picture and held an inner debate about whether he should act on it or not? My head was in bits and pieces as I overanalyzed basically every interaction I had with Ben for the past months. I had to rip the band-aid off and talk to Ben directly. So I asked him if he'd be free after work and he came over. We usually don't spend time alone at each other's place, so he knew that something wasn't quite right. It was very awkward, but I had carefully thought about what to say beforehand, which made it a bit easier. I told Ben that I valued our friendship, but had gotten the suspicion that he might want more out of our relationship than I could give him and asked if this was true. Ben is a bad liar, so he got defensive instead and asked me if Chris wanted to separate us. He used that phrasing, separate us. I told him that it did not matter if Chris was involved in this because I just wanted a clear answer on whether us being friends was enough for him or not. He avoided the answer. He asked again if this was because of Chris. He spun in circles trying to change the subject and ended up saying some mean things about Chris not being a good person and whatnot. A reminder that their first and only interaction had been at the party. I, however, stayed focused as I wanted an answer. Given that his avoiding my question was answer enough, I was getting angry with him and I wanted him to spell it out. After some back and forth, he finally snapped. Fine, I thought that we'd eventually get back together and it was only a matter of time until you realized that we were meant to be. You should be with me, then we wouldn't have to deal with this. His words still echo in my head, like, what? I could have handled him having a little crush on me or if he felt that some things were left unresolved, but this? It felt like my entire world was shattered. All these years of friendship, he just stuck around to one day get back together with me? Everything we've been through and everything he did for me was just so that I'd eventually realize that we should date again? I told him that I couldn't return his feelings. Not now and not in the future. We had tried twice, but it didn't work out. At least for me it didn't. And I saw nothing that could change that. I wanted us to be friends, but I don't think it is possible under these conditions. He got pretty worked up about it, and it was like watching someone go through all the stages of grief except acceptance. We can still work this out. This is unfair. Nobody will ever love me. I'll change and we can try again in a few months. It took a lot out of me, but I remained calm and told him that it'd be better if we stopped seeing each other for quite some time. Then I asked him to leave. I was exhausted and honestly creeped out. I felt so betrayed. This person that I was so close to and that I trusted so much was always acting with an ulterior motive. I called my best friend, and once she heard me sob through the speaker, she got in her car and came over. I told her what happened and she was horrified. She had no idea. As word spread over these last 2 days, it turned out that my friends didn't know about Ben's feelings either, and most of them were shocked and repelled by how he acted. I got some amazing support from my friends, and they were great at helping me not lose my head over this so far. Chris and I talked yesterday, and I apologized for putting him in such a horrible situation. I hadn't wanted for us to start out with this level of drama. He believes that I wasn't to blame, but I still think I should have realized some things earlier. It's been 5 years of friendship, for Pete's sake. Chris was very sweet. He ordered food from my favorite takeout place and we watched a movie and cuddled up on the sofa. He said that he was glad that we came out okay and somehow everything was worth the struggle in the end. He also asked if I wanted to be his girlfriend and I said yes. Wow, OP, that was a roller coaster. I'm sure Ben was seeing it as, well, she friend-zoned me, she sucks. But the thing is, OP, you gave it a shot twice. It didn't work out. You thought you both were in the same page and he secretly was being the nice guy. Hopefully Chris is as good as he sounds on paper and you guys are having a lot of fun. So here's wishing you the best in the future, OP. Thank you so much for sharing and take care. Now, even though that was a really long story, we can try to fit in a really quick mood booster post. And it's from the subreddit Malicious Compliance by user the Dukemeister. Just get one donut, they said. We only need one. Didn't specify the size. Smiley face. Coffee. It's a small one, but it's my birthday. Happy birthday, OP. And this was too funny not to share. So, I wake up, make a hot pocket, and I'm told I wasn't meant to eat breakfast. Confused, I put it in the fridge. Didn't want to waste it. After which, I get ready for the day and my stepdad walks into the apartment with a donut box. I take it, saying thanks, obviously, and when I opened it, giant donut. It takes up the entire box. Baffled, I show my mom and she has this look of confusion, then realization as she looks at my stepdad and says, I said only one. And to which my stepdad replies, didn't specify the size. Thank you, stepdad, for a giant donut. Wow, actually I'd never thought about it. A giant birthday donut. Thank you, stepdad. He knows what's up. Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.